Several ancient cultures, most notably the Greeks, employed a cycle of 99 months, which is 2-ish days longer than 8 years. While not quite as good as the Metonic Cycle, which we'll talk about later, it is still remarkably accurate, especially as it's unlikely to deviate too noticeably over the course of a human lifetime. This system was known as the Octaeteris, which is Greek for 8 years, and it was purportedly once used to calculate the dates for the Olympics. Well, what about the Metonic Cycle? Well, the Metonic Cycle, also called an Octaeteris, which means 19 years, is a 19-year cycle of 12 and 13-year months that aims to harmonize the cycles of the moon with the cycles of the seasons. It's named after Meton of Athens, who introduced it to the Attic calendar in the 5th century BCE. The cycle itself, however, dates back much further than him. There's evidence that the cycle was used by the Babylonians at least as early as the 6th century, 100 years before Meton. After Meton, the cycle continued to be employed in Mediterranean and Near Eastern calendars, such as other Greek calendars, the Roman calendar, and, perhaps most famously, the Hebrew calendar, which still uses it to this day. The cycle is actually pretty ingenious for its simplicity. 235 synodic months, the length it takes for the moon to go through all its phases, happens to be only about 2 hours and 5 minutes longer than 19 tropical years, which is the time it takes to experience all 4 seasons, which is about the length of Spirited Away, which was essentially negligible for now, but we'll get to that later. The Saros is unique amongst these systems, as its purpose is not to harmonize the lunar and solar cycles as with the Octaeteris or the Metonic Cycle, but rather to predict eclipses. It is a period of precisely 6,585 and 1/3 days, which is about 18 years and either 10 or 11 1/3 days, after which the eclipses repeat. For example, 18 years after the eclipse on August 21st, 2017, there will be a nearly identically shaped eclipse in East Asia. Likewise, 18 years after the eclipse that happened back in April, there will be a similarly shaped eclipse in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. So what about the errors in the Metonic Cycle? Well, as it turns out, the error wasn't completely negligible. And so, around a century after Meton introduced his calendar, Callippus of Cyzicus introduced his eponymous 76-year cycle. It featured 4 Metonic cycles, but his distribution of 29 and 30-day months differed from Meton's slightly, which aligned the calendar closer to a 365.25 day long average year length, which was the commonly accepted value at the time. In about 150 BCE, Hipparchus noted an improvement of Callippus' cycle by stringing together 4 of them and then removing a day, just as Callippus had done with Meton's cycle. This created a 3,760 month and 304 year cycle that better aligned to the actual year length and better accounted for the drift in the cycle of seasons caused by the precession of the equinoxes. But what is the precession of the equinoxes? The error wasn't completely. So what about the errors in the Metonic Cycle? Well, as it turns out, the error wasn't completely negligible. Well, as it turns out, the error wasn't completely negligible. Well, as it turns out, the error wasn't completely negligible. And so, around a century after Meton introduced his calendar, Callippus of Cyzicus introduced his eponymous 76-year cycle. I'm redoing that entire thing.